Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. My guest this evening will discuss tax, and that's that dreadful thing that's affected lots of people's pay packets. But before we start, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask you all to put your mind a little bit outside of Sri Lanka, where we are having our own set of troubles. But let's cast our mind towards the Islamic Republic of Iran, where the BBC reported a couple of days ago that a young couple, 21, 22, were arrested because they were dancing, the dancing couple. They danced and they put it on their social media posts, but they didn't link it to any of the protests that's going on in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And for their dancing together, they were charged and were given a collective sentence, each of 10.5 years, merely for expressing joy towards one another. Think about that. My guest this evening is Mr. N.R. Gajendran, the tax expert, of course. Very good evening to you, Mr. Gajendran.
Good evening, Sharad.
Has your phones been ringing off the hook since this new taxes came?
Yes, of course, because this tax has affected every household, sometimes more than one person. Taxes are inevitable, but people say, and it's the reality, it's unbearable.
Mr. Gajendran, you know, if somebody was earning 100,000 rupees, how much would the tax be?
100,000 a month, no tax.
150?
You have to pay on the 50,000 additional 6%. Basically, if a person earns 300,000 now, a month, he will pay about 450,000 rupees a year, 40,000 rupees a
40,000 a month.
Earlier, he would have paid 2,000-3,000 rupees.
2,000 or 3,000?
3,000. Sometimes
this
at
is
the
an
lower
amazing
end,
amount of money.
They are lower end. The amount of tax you pay is some over 10 times, 11 times also.
But surely the people can't afford it.
Of course, yes, because
what can they do?
Particularly, the employees are in
have
tatters,
no choice.
In tatters, and of course the corporates also looking at it for the first time, because the high end, the talent, there is to hold talent is
difficult.
It's difficult.
But then if everybody is doing the same thing, so there's no difference whether you work for company A, B or C.
So there are because those days employees relied on the companies. Now companies want the employees more than the employees want in the companies at the higher end, because most of them are leaving the country, many of them are leaving the country, and there are others picking up, headhunting and picking up these guys at a higher pay. So particularly the companies which are generating exports and also their revenue is connected to exports, by and large they have different formulas and they are bearing the cost of the tax at least, which is a great thing for those employees. But the bulk of them are suffering.
Of course, and we have, but there are many questions, and thank you for already sending them. 0772 300 305 by SMS or WhatsApp, please, straight through to here. You can't call us. But Mr. Gajendran, now you know the NPP, JVP, NPP. They said that they would like to increase the threshold to 200,000. What kind of impact will there be? Do you think they've done an impact study on this?
First of all, I don't know whether we have done an impact study in imposing this tax.
The 150,000?
100,000 rupees and the new tax, because few months ago they had this 200,000 in mind. They announced it, and the highest rate was 24 or 30%. And the slabs also slightly different. But then again, within few weeks, they reduced the tax-free threshold to 100,000 a month and 1.2 million a year. And now every slab of 500,000 gets taxed at multiples of 6%. And over at 3.7 million a year, that is about 30,000 a month, over that amount you are going to pay at 36% at a time where the rupee has depreciated and the prices have soared, not only because of the depreciation of the rupee, but again supply chain mismatches.
And another question to you. Now, you know, in the case of, say, the plantation sector, so when a superintendent or one of the officers gets a house on the estate, well, that man has to pack and go and live there. Why is it that he has to be taxed on that house?
Basically, if the house is being given as a privilege for you.
No, it's not a privilege.
No, if it is part of the job,
yeah,
arising out of the job,
yeah,
you have to stay there and you are somewhere else,
yeah,
then it's not a
it's not a perk.
It's not a perk. It's not a perk. For example, you are given a vehicle to travel for office purposes. It's not a perk. Say if there are architects, engineers go where they have to go outstation and stay in restaurants or.
What about after office? If you use the car, which is generally given to you to get to work, let's say,
yes,
like in your example.
Yeah.
What about if the car is then driven home or for private purposes?
Yeah, if it is for private purposes, then the non-cash benefit comes in.
So, obviously, like most of my questions, Mr. Gajendran, there's a political angle to it. And I would like to know, when the President or the Prime Minister gets in his car and he goes to work, to his office, and at the end of the day when he comes back home to wherever he's staying, is there a benefit for him there, and should he be taxed on that?
There can be a benefit of the private element coming in, and if he's using, say, whoever the official uses the vehicle to go over the weekend for some for outstation or somewhere, if you use your office vehicle for private purposes,
yeah,
then the non-cash benefit element comes in.
So when
But there can be employees who are given vehicle and they are reimbursed their cost only for doing their office work.
Right.
That's not income for them. There is no privilege. There is not a perk.
Right.
That is the company's cost is met by the employees, and the employees are reimbursed.
Okay, another one. Explain this to me. In the list of benefits and so on, and how you tax them, I noticed that they talk about housing and fuel allowance and a vehicle allowance. There's no mention of helicopters.
Do anyone gets helicopters? Yeah.
Well, I have the President, the Prime Minister, and the Cabinet Ministers.
I think in
another government previously, the children and the wife.
I think whole purpose of those vehicles are for your official purposes, but if you are using for private purposes, that's a different matter altogether.
If you've forgotten the sambal and you send it off to get the sambal and bring it back, then that's obviously private.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But no, a little bit more serious. You know, when the economy is already shrunk from about 80 billion to about 73 billion, so economy shrunk. So clearly the taxes will shrink.
Of course, yes.
So now this increasing taxes isn't going to help, is it?
Yeah, the point is the increase in taxes, you're expecting additionally 1.4 billion revenue.
From where? When the economy shrunk.
So these numbers, I wouldn't know how it has been picked, whether they have researched these numbers, studied, analyzed these numbers and estimated, but it is 1.4 billion. Very unlikely they are going to raise this money because employees are finding it difficult to pay, and people who have other than employment income, I have a feeling they will have to choose between paying the tax and meeting their basic prerequisites to enjoy a minimum quality of life.
What about this 5% of an FD, fixed deposit interest?
That's a withholding tax. It's not a final tax.
So you have to still pay the. But previously it was a final tax.
Earlier it was final withholding tax.
But now it's not.
It is not now.
So they're covering all the loopholes.
Yeah, now they are saying if passive income also, they had, because the argument, the theory behind that was interest is savings. You have earned the money, paid the tax, and this is savings, so passive income should be taxed at a low rate. But now the government needs money, so they are taxing the passive income also at normal rates.
But when it's all said and done, will the government have enough money for its recurrent expenditure?
Basically, the government's the budgetary estimates on revenue has never been achieved.
Right.
I don't know whether there are rare occasions they would have achieved, but to my knowledge, it has never been achieved. And recurrent expenditure is about 4.6 trillion. And capital expenditures are about 1.2 trillion. So total is 5.8 trillion expenditure. And I don't think we can have the luxury of having so much of expenditure when we are printing money, when we are bankrupt. In fact, the increase in the expenditure for 2023 pips up against the increase in revenue. So it's something that authorities have to look into. Now they are forced. Recently they said they are going to cut 6% on the expenditure.
Yes.
Out of that 1% going for medicines.
Yeah.
Now today again, or yesterday, last few days again, it's being announced that further curtailment of expenditure. It is inevitable. You don't have the money to spend, and if you are going to print money, it's again the value of the money drops. Inflation, the way it is going, you might not be able to print money when the multilateral agencies intervene.
So really, what about when you study the well-publicized sort of benefits that members of parliament get, and you put their whole package together, it surely takes them towards the 350,000.
Oh yeah, they will have, including their benefits.
What's your take? Do you think that they should pay tax?
I think they are paying tax. They should be paying tax.
They should be paying tax.
I think Parliament, they are certainly employees, unless
so that's the word. They're employees.
Yeah.
Who's their employer?
The state, public servants, no.
Right.
Servants, no. We are servants of the state. We are servants of the people.
What about then explain the business about why did the judicial officers get a stay order?
Oh, that's this is the first case, I think, to my knowledge, where the new act has been tested, the new Inland Revenue Act, which came into play in 2017.
Yeah.
Going through the interim order, core judicial officers, they are officers of the court.
Yes.
And the basic principle is, the Judicial Service Commission or whoever it is was about to withhold tax as under the as an employee using the PAY tables. The writ application was sought in the courts, and the interim order says, look here, they are not, the judicial officers are not employees. If you are an employee, there is an employee-employee relationship, and the employee has control and command over the employees. Judicial officers under the democratic setup, they are independent people. You can't be employed under and be command and control of the people. So there is no way you could deduct withhold tax using the PAY table. An interim order has been given, and the respondents have been given time to make their submissions on the 9th of February.
And another question, this one has actually come through on here. Somebody's asking, we obviously know why they're asking, but anyway, it could be a reasonable question. I'll ask it anyway. What about this business about a business, let's say a corporate, giving a bus to a political party, and then that political party donating the bus to anyone, some needy school, let's say? Is there any additional taxes that the government is losing out on in this scenario?
Not really. If someone has money, I'm not talking the proprietorness of donating and things like that. But from purely on a tax point of view, sometimes on a transaction there can be transaction taxes, but if there's no transaction taxes, there can't be, every receipt is not an income. That matter has come up even in these judicial officers' cases, because you get some receipt, every receipt is not an income. What is taxed is within what comes within the scope of the Income Tax Act. So if someone has money and if they donate the money or gift it to some needy purposes, there is no taxation. Income tax at least.
We've got some more questions for you, Mr. Gajendran, but we'll do that just soon after the break, shall we? And it's now time to look at the headlines from the Primetime News team, and we'll be returning to rejoin Mr. N. Gajendran, the tax advisor and tax consultant. See you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you.
Vasant Mudulige released after 167 days. Kalaniya University students take to the streets. Police use water cannons to disperse protesters. Repeal the PTA immediately. Countries including the United States and Britain stress at the United Nations Universal Periodic Review. Rehearsals held for the 75th Independence Day. Catholic Church to boycott celebrations.
කතෝලික සභාව නියෝජනය කරන කිසි කෙනෙක් ඊට සහභාගී වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
Protests against new tax regime. President given 2 weeks to call for a discussion. Hold elections in March, giving people across the country a voice in their future, says US Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland. A government with a public mandate is required to unlock IMF funds similar to Bangladesh, says Dr. Harsha De Silva.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you. Experience the best in healthcare at Durden's Hospital's new Alfred Place wing. We continue to evolve into a purpose-built hospital of the future, with an ambience built to deliver world-class care. Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Mr. N.R. Gajendran, the tax consultant, who kindly comes here and tells us his take on taxes. Mr. Gajendran, what is your take on the expenditure, spending tax money, tax revenue, in a period of bankruptcy, and spending that tax revenue on celebrating the independence? What are we celebrating anyway?
Yeah, there are different connotations for that.
But what's yours? You are a taxpayer.
Yeah. Austerity at this point of time has to be demonstrated. It was something, the amount was far exceed of this. It's about 200 million rupees expenditure. But I wouldn't know whether that will stop at that. With all the, there may be other expenditures not directly incurred. I hope that is a judicious decision.
I hope that when they're partaking in their food on Independence Day, I hope they will be ashamed, because there are children who can barely be given one meal a day now, and that's for real. If you want to find out, go out of the city and find out there. People are suffering, and this is purely a personal opinion, but it is also the opinion of several people who've sent me messages that it is a crying shame at what this government is doing. And I hope that the diplomatic community who may well be present on the 4th of February, that they steadfastly refuse to eat anything and ask for the food to be taken to areas where the people will welcome it with open arms. Because the problem in Sri Lanka is for real. It is not some story designed to sell advertising. It is for real. Mr. Gajendran.
That was a statement for us.
That was a statement. But it was a statement, but necessary, because my phone is full of these messages. They come not only during the program, they come at other times too. People from abroad. Today alone, I've had messages from the United Kingdom, from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Dammam, Riyadh and Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, one in the UAE. I think that must have been a number from Dubai, I suppose, but it's the same code, 971. But they're all saying literally the same thing.
And that is true, because on the eve of the first tax which is being withheld, it was done this yesterday,
yeah.
Many people have expressed this view. Very true.
We have a viewer from who watches it through YouTube from Seychelles. That viewer told me that there's no way they're sending the money through the banking system, because apparently he can get much more using the so-called unjust system, and that the money is delivered to his house. So unless Governor Nandalal wants to do that, then that particular person is not going to be sending his money.
Remittances for 2022 has dropped.
Indeed.
3.7 billion.
So at the end of the day, Mr. Gajendran, how does one resolve this problem? Isn't it obvious that we need a dollar earning strategy?
Of course. I think before that I've been always saying the shonky, questionable administration, because whether they have the legitimacy and the mandate, and also imbecile guys should not be there to make decision. So this has to be done first. Those two matters have to be done first. Then I believe everything will fall into play. Honesty and critical intelligence has to be there for people who are sitting and making decisions on the lives and livelihood of others, who occupy a position of trust, who have a fiduciary responsibility. They have to demonstrate their decisions are not self-seeking and not self-enhancing. It is all people-based and benefits the multitude, and also they are competent and fit and proper people to make those decisions.
And what about, this is a question from outside of Sri Lanka. What will happen to people who are not able to pay their taxes or evade paying taxes? What can the government do? What should be done?
The people are in a pathetic state. They will have to decide between paying taxes or they have to decide whether they are going to meet their basic prerequisites for their legitimate. Today I got a call from a chartered accountant. He says, I got my first pay. Virtually I have nothing now, because I have 2 loans and interest. He had something else. And now there's 80,000 rupees deducted. I believe the income must have been around 450,000 rupees. 80,000 has been deducted. Earlier it was nothing. So now virtually nothing. Your income. So even at that level, people can't afford it, because they had no breathing space to reschedule their expenditure patterns, to replan their life. Now, if the state says we can't cut down expenditure immediately just like that, we need at least some time, they are talking of 1-2 years, right? Then what do the individuals? Same principle will apply for the individuals. You can't come and just take away because you have the power of the legislation and that's the precarious position people are in. Particularly not only the low income people, the lower middle income people. Someone might say 400,000 is a tidy sum. If the guy who is making 400,000 is unable to meet his basic obligations, imagine the guy who is getting less than that. So if someone says our basic tax-free threshold should be about 200,000 rupees, that is way forward.
Do you think that it's fair? I'm not saying this is happening, but if it is to happen, in a way it's kind of hypothetical. But do you think it's fair that if parliamentarians look at their slip now and say, "Oh my God," and then the parliament decides that the state would up their remuneration to meet the tax liabilities?
I don't know that will happen, but I don't know parliamentarians, the way people say, they are in a different world. I don't think they get impacted by this because maybe all their expenses are met for in some form or the other.
But then that's sort of not acceptable because they then will be unable to understand the Vedanava of the public.
I think
of the people.
I don't think they are in the same world as you and I.
They're in a different world, in another orbit.
Yeah, I think so.
My God. Somebody's saying here, sadly, government officials are not listening to programs like this, or listen and take no notice. Well, that's probably true. We are absolutely right. It was reported in one story the poor mother had to temper red chilies to feed her children. My God. This is awful. Sri Lanka is in dire straits.
Taxes could have been imposed, but the timing of it is not at all, it is injurious because the value of money has dropped precipitously.
Isn't it also injurious and insulting to the people who are suffering and who are challenged to look for food and an income, to see in their as they pass a television showroom and they see the Independence Day celebrations, where they know that it is costing them money?
It's going to hurt many people's feeling.
Oh yes, it's going to hurt many people's feelings, all right. Do you think that the people might be tempted to remember that by the time the election comes along?
Very difficult to say that for us because we are an island. We have islanders' mentality, and I think we have short memories.
My goodness me. In the end of the day, in that case, I'm going to read something out which you brought in on the program some weeks ago. And these are both from court cases heard by the Supreme Court. And in their judgment, in their order, one of them, in one case, it says, in this context, a greater responsibility lies on executive and administrative institutions to act in accordance with their mandate in the performance of their duties. This court shall continue to exercise its constitutional role as the watchful guardian over executive and administrative action. And that is what I believe happened the other days when they ordered against the former president and various officials. And again, when in the Inland Revenue Amendment Bill matter, nevertheless, we are mindful that the court is the last bulwark to protect the rule of law and prevent any breach of public trust. Corruption and wastage of public finance must be addressed and violators dealt according to law, irrespective of standing.
This is loud and clear.
It's loud and clear.
Loud and clear. And I think we can't lose hope. The third pillar of democracy, the judiciary, has stepped up. And basically, hope is a spirit of eternity. We are living in hope. I think there is ample opportunities given by the judiciary for us to be in hope.
Mr. Gajendran, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you.
It's now time for the primetime news from that wonderful News First primetime news team. I wish you a very good evening as much as you can. And of course, God bless you all.